Hey friends, how's it going? If you're new to this channel, my name is Johnny and I'm a staff software engineer at Meta. You know, this year is a little special for me because it's been 10 years since I became a software engineer. Looking back, going from accounting to program manager at a hardware company, and then eventually doing a boot camp to my first engineering job and all the way to Meta and to staff engineer. You know, it was a long journey and I've learned a ton of things along the way. In this video, I'm going to share the 40 lessons that I've learned along the way in hopes that maybe it will help you speed along your journey to become a software engineer like myself. I guarantee that there's going to be some lessons here that are pretty controversial and hot takes that I actually think is really important. So I'm confident that some of these lessons are going to be net new for you. Without further ado, let's dive into the 40 lessons that I've learned in the past 10 years of being a software engineer. Lesson number 1 is to learn at least one language very deeply. When I first started to learn how to program, I actually just jumped around from a lot of different languages. C++, Java, Swift, JavaScript, Ruby. I tried a bunch of these things and it really slowed me down a lot. For example, when I started with C++, I gave up in a few months, same with Java. And it wasn't really until I committed to one language for a really long period of time, at least 100 days. It wasn't until then that I started to really understand programming and code projects. Here, I recommend doing a 100-day commit challenge, and it really helped me when I was first starting out. And in fact, at the end of that 100-day was when I kind of broke through that first barrier of tutorial help. So I highly recommend you trying and focusing on one language and ignoring the other shiny languages and things like that when you're first getting started. Lesson number 2 is actually to eventually learn at least one strongly typed language. Now this could be Java, Kotlin, or Swift, or any of these modern strongly typed languages. But for me, for the longest time, I was what you call a script kiddie. I just primarily worked on JavaScript and Ruby and some of these just dynamic languages, right? So the thing is, it wasn't until I switched to mobile development and had to learn Java and Kotlin, it wasn't until then that I really truly appreciated strongly typed languages. It kind of changes that way you think a little bit when you program. The whole compile time, error corrections, and kind of the way you have to structure your programs, it's a very different paradigm. And the thing is, it really unlocks scalability factor to your code and really helps you think about your programming in different ways. So I highly recommend you to learn a strongly typed language at some point. Lesson number 3 is to invest in learning data structures and algorithms, and also design patterns, actually. One of the most common tropes that you hear online is that you don't end up using data structures and algorithms in your work. There's some truth to this, but honestly, you actually do end up using a ton of these kind of raw data structures and algorithms when you're building complicated systems. And in fact, if you just look at your favorite apps that you use on a day-to-day basis, you'll just see data structures and algorithms everywhere. You know, Facebook is a graph. So a lot of our problems have to do with graph traversal problems and graph searching problems. And the thing is, if you learn design patterns and things like that, you'll often notice that your favorite frameworks uses a lot of design patterns under the hood. And if you know a lot of these design patterns, it's really easy to pick up new languages and new frameworks and new systems very quickly. So that's just one useful side of investing in data structures and algorithms. But honestly, if you want to get into Fang, you need to learn data structures and algorithms. So that alone should be worth it for you to try to invest and learn data structures and algorithms. Lesson number 4 is to get really good at debugging. I think debugging is probably one of the most foundational skills that you need to develop as a software engineer. And there's tons of ways to debug. You could have a debugger step through the code, or you could have a bunch of console logs. In fact, I actually think just adding print statements or console logs is one of the best ways to debug. And you could kind of tell how experienced someone is just by the way they debug. For example, oftentimes I usually get pulled into various work streams that I actually have no knowledge of. I just get pulled in because there's some crazy bug that the team that's working on it can't fix. So they usually pull me in and I go through the code, I try to repro the bug, and I have a bunch of tools and knowledge on how to debug now, whether it's debugging performance using systrace and digging through our error logs and things like that. So there's just a very wide range of skills that you pick up as a a debugger or a fixer archetype, it's a very important skill for you to develop and get really good at as an engineer. Lesson number 5 is to think in first principles and to dig in for yourself. One of the most common mistakes that I see new engineers make, or just anyone in general, is that oftentimes they don't actually do the thinking for themselves. This can happen very easily when you're debugging a crazy sev or you're looking at some issue. Someone will say, hey, this is a known issue. This happens because of X. And at some point, those answers are okay. But if you feel truly in your gut that there's something else going on, then you should dig in for yourself. There was this one time in my career where I joined a project kind of late into the life cycle of that project, and it was like a brand new war room because they just couldn't ship the project. So I was sent there to kind of debug and look at the overall, like audit the entire thing. And when I talked to the team that was working on it, they just told me that everything was fine. And there's probably some issue with the logging or some data. And that's why the metrics are like all messed up. The thing is, I was able to find a ton of issues right away just by simply testing the app myself and really diving in and playing with the features myself. You know, I even found a bug where when you hit the back button, it killed the entire session. And just fixing that alone improved the regression by 30%. So one of the hallmarks of a great engineer is that you're always thinking from first principles and you're really kind of questioning like the state of the world. Of course, you really need to kind of pick and choose when you do this, but you'll get a good sense of it if you think in first principles. Lesson number 6 is to step away from the problem. Whenever you're working on a very tough bug or some feature and you're just getting stuck, it might just mean that you need a break and you need to like take a moment to step out. Oftentimes, I find the best inspiration and the best like ideas when I'm showering or taking a walk or doing something else. And this is not just for engineering, but for all types of problems. Sometimes you're just too close to the problem that you've been working on to just not see what's right in front of you. So take a break sometimes. Lesson number 7 is to ship an app from beginning to the end. Now, I've actually shipped a ton of apps even before I was an engineer. When I got first started into app development and when I was working with my friends, and this was like 15 years ago almost, when we were first getting started, and I wasn't even thinking about being an engineer at the time. I actually started out as a designer where I made game assets for my friends when they were programming. Even then, I think we shipped a few apps, and later on when they left, I wanted to become an engineer. I actually shipped a few apps just by myself. And you learn so much by doing this process. You just won't get that experience if you never push yourself to do it. The thing is, if you work at a large company, you may only work on this small portion of the app. Maybe a feature, maybe some back-end stuff, maybe some front-end stuff. But you know, you might miss out on all of like the things that you need to like set up the bundle, set up the iOS account, or if you're doing a web app, maybe like setting up the cloud formations for the deployments or like all of the AWS stuff. Like there's just like so much that goes into developing, shipping, and maintaining an app. You just will not learn any of that if you don't ship something from beginning to the end. Lesson number 8 is to work on projects for more than a year. So this is actually kind of funny if you think about it as like a tip. But the thing is, especially if you work at large companies like Meta or Google or Apple, chances are that you're going to get reorged all the time. So it's actually really hard to be able to work on a single project for a long time. But I highly recommend, if you have the opportunity to do it, to stick around and really learn from working on projects for a long period of time. The thing is, when you're making decisions about your code architecture or your system design, unless you're going to be working on that project for a really long time, you will not learn from the choices that you make because you will no longer be there when that architecture or system is truly tested, right? And like usually system design and like these kind of like large architectures, you won't really see the flaws and like the kinks in the armor until it gets to a certain scale. You know, whether it's like code extensibility or evolution of the code, maybe like a cloud setup that is like incorrect. All of these things you really don't know or learn from it unless you've worked on projects for a long time. And if you have this opportunity and if you learn from it, you're able to take that experience and make better decisions in the long run. Lesson number 9 is to not chase the latest frameworks, especially if you're working in like web development in the JavaScript world, or I guess even like AI stuff and like Python world. There's probably a new framework every other month or every other week. I mean, the industry moves so quickly, so there's just something new to look at all the time. The thing is, most of these frameworks come and go. Only a very few of them last for a long time. And I think like React is an example of a framework that has lasted very long time. I don't know if it's a framework. It's more like a set of libraries, right? Instead of learning frameworks, learn design patterns, first of all, but don't chase after these frameworks. If you're starting a new project and if you want to invest in something to learn, think about what the large companies are using already and what has been tried and true and battle tested. When you're building something new, you don't want to be worrying whether or not this project that you're building on some new framework is going to scale to X number of users. Honestly, the whole chasing the frameworks is a very like junior, earlier season of your engineering career. And later on, you'll realize that the frameworks doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is. At the end of the day, engineering is really about choosing the right tool for the right job. So when it comes down to it, you'll be able to pick up some new framework very quickly if you have to. So don't chase it, just lazy load that stuff. Lesson number 10 is to not get intimidated by complexity. The thing is, software engineering is really complicated. There's so many systems, and sometimes there's just these like terminologies that make things sound more complicated than it really is. I remember back at Capital One, we're getting into Kafka and like streaming and topics and producers and all these like these terms that I had no idea what it was. And the thing is, it happened after a reorg where the people who are there already were already kind of like used to all of these terms, and we were all new coming from a different side of the like company, so we felt very out of place. But honestly, it's not a big deal. You end up learning it. At the end of the day, it's just code. You're just making requests and like, connecting to things. There's just different protocols that you might need to learn, and it's not really a big deal. And honestly, I remember when I was first getting started, programming in itself, everything about programming seemed very complicated. Especially like Java with like the very verbose nature of like Java with like static, final, strong, like all of these like types and stuff like that. Like I remember when I was first getting started, all of that was very complicated. So whenever I run into something new that seems really complicated now, I just don't really worry about it. And I take the time to kind of just investigate, dive deep, and learn it if I feel like I should learn it. And here I want to quote Steve Jobs. Actually, this quote actually helped me decide to become an engineer. Let me just read it out for you real quick. Steve Jobs said, "Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it." This is such a powerful quote, and I actually revisit it maybe a few times a year just to remember that, you know what, it's true. All of the things that we interact with in life is something that you can probably influence and build as well. Lesson number 11 is to always be curious and learn a breadth of technologies. The thing is, the software engineering industry is pretty big. There's a bunch of different domains, back-end, front-end, cloud computing, AI, security, cybersecurity. Even within like mobile development, there's like a whole bunch of different technologies, right? You don't obviously want to be an expert in everything. I don't think you can be. But the point is, you want to have a good sense of what's going around in the world. How does crypto work? What is an Ethereum contract? These are important things to understand, especially like AI these days, right? You really want to have a good understanding of where kind of the general direction of the tech industry is going. And having a very curious mindset in this and kind of keeping your nose to the ground in all these various different things. And just for fun, mind you, you don't have to be an expert, like I said. It will help you kind of ground you, and you'll be able to take learnings from these different types of industries into your own domain. Like my main thing is mobile engineering right now. One of the main things I noticed is that because of my knowledge in React and web development, I was able to pick up like Compose or like Swift UI very quickly because it's very similar. There's a lot of like similarities with the whole one-way data flow and things like that. You'll see these patterns all over the place, and it's really important to kind of just look around for fun and be curious in technology in general. Lesson number 12 is don't sleep on AI. I think this may be one of the most important lessons, and in fact, I started really thinking about this like 3 years ago when all of this AI stuff is kind of like started to boom. I noticed then that like, I really need to learn this. I really need to position myself in my day-to-day work and also like my side things to really learn how to leverage AI in a lot of my workflows. You know, my YouTube channel is a large part of it right now is about AI, and it's really me just exploring a lot of AI features, tools, and I'm trying to like kind of soak it all in, and obviously I'm sharing it with you guys. You'd be really surprised that like even a lot of engineers at Meta, they don't use LLMs on the side to program their own side project. A lot of people, and kind of rightfully so, don't really care that much about all of this stuff. They just want to use it to help them, you know, answer some questions quickly on like ChatGPT or whatever. But for me, I want to learn it. I want to learn how to run these models locally. I want to know what it means to have like a stable diffusion model versus like an auto regression model for like image generation. I want to know how to do video generation or even like voice cloning. I just really want to know. I feel like this point in time is really when like the next set of like really high skilled engineers are going to like come into play. And it's really going to be the people who know how to use and leverage AI to make features and really be like the 10x or 100x engineers, right? Like it sounds like a joke, but if you know how to like vibe code efficiently, for example, and not make a ton of tech debt, then the amount of things that you can do is like game changing. There's a caveat to all of this, but the high level lesson here is don't skip out on AI. Lesson number 13 is to get into Fang. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but in my opinion, getting into Fang is like winning the lottery. For me personally, my income basically went up by 50%, even though I got a down level when I went to Meta. I was a principal associate, which is like a senior level at Capital One. And when I joined Meta, I got down level. And not only that, I had to join in as a rotational engineer, which is like a special program for non-traditional backgrounds where I had to basically prove that I could be an engineer at an E4 level, their mid-level, within a year. So basically, I joined as an E3. That's like kind of how you can think about it. And since then, I was able to, you know, early graduate that program in 6 months. It took me a year to go from 4 to 5 and another year to go from 5 to 6. And, you know, I've been a staff engineer for a few years now. But the point is that whole like trajectory really changed my life. And obviously for total comp with like all the stock appreciation, it's like well over 7 figures now, which is like mind blowing to think about because when I joined Capital One, I was so ecstatic to making a little over 100 grand because before then as a program manager, I was making 60 grand. So like almost every year I was an engineer, my income went up 30 to 50% and sometimes even more. And that was just year over year. I had 6 promotions in the past 10 years. It's just mind blowing how much it really does feel like it's winning the lottery. Now, TC aside, there's also the experience and the personal growth, right? You just get access to so many smart engineers and mentors at Meta and like probably any FAANG companies. And then that also means that your network is like top notch, right? Like your coworkers are not gonna just go to some no-name companies anymore. Most of them are gonna go to other FAANG companies. So your network just becomes top notch as well. So I know grinding interviews suck, but honestly, you can do it. That's the point about FAANG interviews. You know, leak code sucks, but it's a meritocracy, right? Anyone can do it. Anyone can study and get that ticket to join a FAANG level company. Speaking of interviews, lesson number 14 is that interviews are a skill that can be learned. Now, I have an entire video on this that I did last year, but basically FAANG interviews are solved. There's a ton of good resources like Algo Expert and Cracking the Coding interview, obviously, but interviews are just broken down into a few steps, a few coding interviews, a system design, a behavior. You know, all of these, like, you can study and you can do, there's like bunch of companies that does like mock interviews. If you study enough, you should know the answers to the tests. Like, it's like just taking the SATs in a sense. You know, I did terrible in the SSCs, by the way, but it's like SATs that will guarantee for you to make hundreds of $1,000s more money. Like, why wouldn't you do your best in it? Why wouldn't you try? Why would you just scoff at it saying, oh, leak coding sucks, I'll never use it at my job? So what? Like, maybe you do, maybe you won't. But the amount of life-changing money that you can make from joining a FAANG level company is like game-changing. And also, like I mentioned, the access to the network and the resources, it's just game-changing. Oh, I gotta go pick up my kids. Had to come drop off the kid to a taekwondo class, but the lessons have to continue. So, lesson number 15 is to not job hop too often. I don't know if this is controversial or not, but one of the very like common things that people will tell you to do is job hop often, once every 2 years. Job hopping is like the best way to like increase your net worth and your total compensation, right? And while some of that is true, I think in my experience in the 10 years, what I notice is that if you job hop too often, then there's a high likelihood that you'll stay stuck as like a senior engineer for a longer period. The thing is, if you want to become a staff level engineer or staff plus level engineer, you kind of need to have really relevant experience. You need to have big and important projects under your belt. The reality is that at big FAANG companies, most of the time, the critical projects that cannot fail are not going to go to like the person who has just joined the company or who's even like 6 months into the company. Most likely, there's probably like an already established tech lead that's been there for 3+ years, and it really isn't until that 3-year mark, at least from my experience, is when you truly earn the trust and like kind of respect of your leads, like your directors and things like that. You don't really get onto their radars very easily until that like 2 to 3 year mark. That was the case for me. It took me a long time to just kind of work my way with project after project, landing it consistently and then having a high impact and good like ratings throughout the 5 years that I've been at Meta. And luckily enough, I have been kind of with the same leadership for the past 5 years. And around year 3 is when I started getting trusted with like the really important projects. And it's kind of a thing where it's like a virtuous cycle where you do really well, you get recognized, and then next time there's like a really important can't fail project, they come to you first because, from an organization perspective, they need to succeed. So if you job off too often, then you're going to miss out on these kind of opportunities and you're going to be basically onboarding for 6 months, working for like a year, and then off ramping for 3 months, and then it's just kind of you'll just have like very like non-interesting projects. It's very easy to suss out like what kind of experience someone had in an interview, whether or not they led like a big work stream or not, like, and they landed some like really important projects for the company. It's like very easy to know. Don't job hop too often. Lesson number 16 is to learn and recognize opportunity and to seize it. One of the key skills that you need to learn when you want to become like a staff plus engineer is to develop your own scope and to find your own scope. And oftentimes it's really kind of like recognizing opportunities as they happen. One of the craziest things that I noticed from my personal experience is that a lot of times, a lot of engineers just ignore written emails, or in our case, we have something called Workplace, where like your directors or your other like senior managers or your XFM partners, they like make posts, socialize some of the things that's been on their mind, whether that be some kind of new initiative for better engineering or a focus on interviewing or just whatever it is. Essentially, if you keep an eye out for these kind of posts or emails, like your leaders are essentially just straight up telling you what they need and what they would love if engineers would like pick up and do. The thing is, a lot of engineers just ignore this. So just like looking at for these and noticing that opportunity and seizing it is really important. Another really key like side tip here is that if there is a reorg, chances are that means that there's a bunch of new opportunity that happens with the reorg. When the reorg usually happens, a lot of people are either unhappy or they get removed, or a lot of just change happens. That means a lot of people who own certain pieces of the wider organization or will no longer be there. And that would be a perfect time for you if you're hungry for like new scope and new opportunity to take up that mantle and to kind of like try to make the best of this like kind of crazy situation that happens with a reorg. Yeah, there's like a bunch of ways to find new opportunities, but these are two like common ways. Another good way is to just really like play with the app that you're building, dog food the hell out of it, and then you'll just see tons of bugs, tons of issues, tons of weird user flows. And that's just like a really good way to seize and find opportunities within your current work. Lesson number 17 is to learn to advocate for yourself. Now, I think this is probably a very common issue that a lot of engineers face where they just don't know how to talk about themselves. Honestly, it is kind of embarrassing and a little awkward to talk like proudly about yourself or even say what an amazing job that you did for some project. Even me saying it a little bit is a little awkward. You're probably ready for the next level in a lot of cases, but based on how your packet is written, based on like how you package your, writing and like what you add or leave out in your writing for your performance review, maybe the main differentiator on you getting that promo or not. And the thing is, like, promos happen at most, it's different from company to company, but, at least 6 months or maybe even a year, depends on the company, right? So that's like a long time that you're kind of just doing the previous level's work when you're already doing the next level work. So finding a good manager obviously is really helped and they can help advocate for you. But honestly, you need to learn how to advocate for yourself. As cringy as socializing your work to like an email chain or like a workplace post in our case at Meta, like you got to do those things and you got to like really think about the work that you're doing and present it in a way that is digestible and easy for leads to understand. And that's really just like helping you get the best out of the work that you're already doing. Lesson number 18 is that promotions are not just skill based. Now, what I mean by this is that there's obviously promotions, there's some luck involved, but the thing about promotions is that it is a skill in itself to prepare for promotions, really understanding the system. Like you really need to understand how the company evaluates promotions. If you don't know, find out who does know, ask them a bunch of questions, ask them to mentor you and help you guide through like the career, your promotions. But a promotion usually is a game that you need to play. You need to figure out what the leads care about, what the company cares about, what the exact process is, and it's a skill that you can develop. So if you're not getting promoted, don't think that you're just getting screwed. Really think about it, self-reflect on your journey and your current situation, and chances are there's probably something that you could be doing right now to level up your promotion game. Now, on the subject of promotion, lesson number 19 is to make a brag document. Now, in my time at Meta, I think I've had 15 or so mentees. I've kind of lost count. Right now, I think I have 6 mentees that I do like bi-weekly one-on-ones. And for every single mentee that I have, I tell them to have a brag document. Now, a brag document, what it is it's basically a journal, a work entry for yourself. And you could obviously share that with your manager if you clean it up a little bit. But it's really to just like jot down once a week everything that you did. And this could be like small things like, oh, I made a design comment and that design comment landed. I fixed these number of tasks. I updated this work stream for this SLA workflow. I landed this project's impact. I'm looking into this. Whatever you're doing throughout the day and throughout that week, just write it down. Obviously, this depends on what your company cares about and for promotions and like just like performance rating in general. But if you write these down, you'll soon realize how many of these things that you're doing. So there's a famous saying that says you can't measure what you don't track. And this is like totally true. When I was really serious about my E4 to E5 promotions, I actually had a brag doc where every week I would write down everything that I did. And every one-on-one, I would review it with my manager saying, hey, I'm doing this for impact, I'm doing this for Eng Excellence, I'm doing this for people, and etc. So these are like kind of the large axes that Meta cares about, but you could do the same for your company. The thing is, when I did this, I realized there was a bunch of things that I'm doing where if if I were to write that specific task, like one of the things that I did a lot was give design feedback for my projects. Now, if I just wrote that one item saying I gave design feedback and it changed, that's not really enough in terms of like volume to like write down in my PSC, my performance review. But if I did multiple of it, like 10 or plus times, then I can actually claim that like entire thing as like a single piece of work because the quantity is there. So there's like a ton of things like that that you just don't realize. The thing is, if you don't track it, you won't really know. And because when you're writing your performance review, usually you're thinking about like the big items, you kind of end up missing these things. That's just leaving impact on the table. Like all of that hard work is just going to waste. And the thing is, your manager probably knows a lot more about the performance ratings and the performance review cycle and what makes into a good packet. The thing is, if you don't write it down and review it with him, you won't even realize that some of the things that you're doing is worth writing or worth repeating. The other big pro of doing a brag doc and reviewing it weekly is that you can very easily course correct earlier instead of later. For example, let's say that you're 3 months into the year or the first half, and then you realize you haven't done anything for, I don't know, like better engineering or something. Then you could just see very clearly because you have this brag doc that you're keeping track of and prepare for it and make adjustments very easily. But oftentimes what I notice with mentees is that if they don't do this like kind of tracking, they'll get to the end of the year and as they're writing their performance review or starting thinking about it, they go, shit, I haven't done anything for this like axis that our company cares about. So write a brag doc. It's going to be one of the biggest game changers. Honestly, it's a pain in the ass to do, but if you're serious about your promos, write a brag doc and get like actionable feedback from your managers. Now, lesson number 20 is to take control of your own career. Now, when I say this, it's kind of an accumulation of some of the lessons that I've been saying, but the number one advocate for your career is actually yourself. You really need to take control of your career and then don't blame anyone else but yourself. At the end of the day, you can't blame anyone else. Like you can't blame reorgs or whatever. There might be some extraordinary circumstances, but most of the time, if you're not getting a promo, it's actually really just on you. Don't just like work and not really care about all of this stuff. The reality of the world is that just because you do good work doesn't mean that you're gonna get fair treatment back. That's just like the reality of it. You really need to fight for the work that you did and you have to fight to be visible. Even for like peer feedback, you need to be like pretty strategic when it comes to peer feedback. And obviously all of this is like in the lens of like going for promotions. If you don't care, there's like different optimizations that you can have for your personal like self, right? Whether that's like work-life balance or you just want to work in like a happy environment or work on something that you care about. But in terms of like career trajectory and velocity, it's really up to you. And it's something that you really should think about whether you want to chase after that next level or not. Lesson number 21, and I think it's kind of a spicy one, but the top 1% gets outsized pay. You may think that just because you work at Meta or Fang, other Fang companies, you're getting paid really well. But the thing is, are you the top 1% even within Fang? And this is a really important question to ask yourself because there's something called additional equity. Not every company does this, but most company does some form of this. And it's basically a retention strategy for most companies. And they give out additional equity to certain engineers. Usually it's at directors' discretions. And it's essentially just more money, more RSUs. And it's really hard to go somewhere else if you keep getting additional equities. The way the additional equity gets distributed, it's not really equal. It's really depends on like, are you that top 1%? Are you in a position where the company really can't afford to lose you or they don't want to lose you, or it'd be really expensive for them to find a replacement of you? If you ever gotten additional equity, you definitely know what I'm talking about, but the top 1% of the 1% gets the most pay, and it's like not even close. So it's totally worth going for that if you're already working like extreme hours. I don't know if this is really a lesson, but it's good to know that it exists. Like this is a thing that can happen. There's definitely a payout that can happen if you work even more harder than your other coworkers. Okay, I gotta go pick up my kid at Taekwondo now, and I'll continue this later. Another quick change of scenes. Lesson number 22 is that what's actually holding you back is probably soft skills. This took me a long time to realize at first because I usually thought that being very technically adept and knowing like the best frameworks and things like that was what got you to the next level. But along the way, I really realized what usually limits your work and kind of making additional impact is kind of having really good EQ and soft skills, whether that is working with product managers, designers, or XFN. You really need to nail down the soft skills. You know, one of the encouraging things about soft skills is that it's trainable. I highly encourage you to not skimp out on practicing your soft skills and, you know, making good relationships as you're working throughout your projects. Lesson number 23 is to have an ownership mindset. Now, I made an entire video kind of about this on my journey to becoming a staff software engineer, but I actually think this may be the single most important factor, like mind shift change, that will help you actually get to the next level. Having an ownership mindset will just help you stand out so much more than any of your other coworkers. And this is just because you end up caring the most about the projects, your team's health, your org's health, and just the overall like work that needs to get done. You will be like the number one go-to person if you have this ownership mindset. Lesson number 24 is to never make enemies. The tech industry is actually really small, especially in Silicon Valley. At the start of your career, you'll think that the person that you're working with here and there, you'll probably never meet again if they like go to a different company. But the reality is that people keep coming in and out of your life, especially if you've been at a company for a long time. I've been at Meta for 5 years and I have ran into countless ex-coworkers that went to different teams or we got reorged to different teams, and somehow in like completely different like work streams we end up meeting each other. And it's always like a really pleasant surprise, and it actually makes working a lot more easier as well, especially if you maintain a good relationship. I've once had this situation where I worked with this coworker and he kind of felt a little lazy and he didn't really pull his own weight. I ended up picking up a lot of his slack, but when it came down to the end of year review, I didn't really give him very harsh feedback. I just kind of gave him fair feedback, but mostly positive. And a few years later, actually like 2 years later, we ran into each other again and they ended up working in my same organization. And we ended up partnering again in another project. But this time around, things have changed. And, you know, when we were talking here and there, he remembered me very fondly because he basically told me that he was actually going through some personal things. And so you never really know what is happening with someone. So unless it actually is a point where you need to like stand up for yourself, there's really no need to like go down this path of like making enemies. So yeah, obviously you need to give candor feedback and be fair, especially when it comes to like your organization's health. But at the same time, you know, you don't have to be so harsh all the time. So just never make enemies. Lesson number 25 is to maintain a professional network and be actually really genuine. LinkedIn can be pretty cringy. I myself kind of contribute to a lot of that cringe. But at the same time, it's a legitimate way to stay informed with your ex-coworkers or your friends that you've made along the way. I actually still talk to a lot of my old bosses, especially like my first software engineer boss. His name's Jesse. He's a really great guy. And the thing is, there's just this like sense of psychological safety net when you end up having this large network that you grow over time. Not that like you're just making connections and networks so that you could leverage them to get another job, but it's honestly just like really rewarding to see your network grow. And then you know that you have friends in the industry that can help you if times are tough. But that also means that you should give a helping hand whenever you can. And that actually, to me personally, feels the most rewarding. The fact that I can even offer help. And I remember 10 years ago when I just was getting started, I had no connections. I didn't really know anyone, let alone be able to help anyone. But now I'm in a position where I can be a mentor to someone that's like not even in my company, or I can also just help, give referrals, or just help with like interviews and things like that. It's just actually really rewarding to give back. All right, the real reason why we're in this spot is for lesson number 26 is to invest in a really nice chair and a standing desk. This is a Herman Miller Embody. I even got the Atlas headset right here. And honestly, for the longest time, I didn't think I needed like a really nice chair or a really nice standing desk. This is the Ergonoff standing desk. But yeah, it's a really nice desk. Um, Same with this. This is a very nice chair. And the thing is, you're spending so much time as an engineer in front of a computer. It's just totally worth it. It's like a very good bed, right? You spend so much time of your day sleeping, you need a nice bed. And it's the same thing with work. You spend so much time in front of this desk and in this chair, you should invest in a good one. You really want to take care of yourself when you're working because you're in it for the long run, right? Think of it like a sport. You need to take care of your body so that you can take care of your work. Speaking of that, before we get to the next lesson, come with me for a second. Side tip, drink a lot of water. Tip number 27 is to manage your stress levels. Now, whether that be going out for a drive or shopping, for me, it's just getting out, maybe go play some golf. But once you get to a point where you're working on projects that cannot fail, there's definitely going to be some amount of stress. You're going to be put in situations where normally you wouldn't be put in those situations. You will also have to work on projects that have extremely tight deadlines, and things just can get out of hand. You might get yelled at, not yelled at, but you know, a lot of like leads might like kind of put some stern words about quality this, performance that, deadlines this. It's kind of never ending. So learn to manage your stress. There's also like a micro tip here. If you've never heard of the power pose, that's like really good before you do an interview or give a speech or do a tech talk. It's this thing where you like kind of stretch out like this, and it actually works. I don't know what it is, but I always do it when I need to do an interview or like a preparation for a talk. Right before it, I just do the power pose. That's like a side tip. Tip number 28 is to learn how to say no. Now, this is probably one of the most important tips that you need to learn as soon as possible, really. In the beginning of your career, you're going to constantly be probably just saying yes. Yes to a new piece of work. You actually might be very eager to work, and that's okay in the beginning. But as you get more senior and senior, you really need to say no. There's actually a really good book on this called The Power of No. And when I read it, I just found it really profound, and it really changed a lot of my aspects on how I think about work and tasks. You know, the thing is, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you really need to make the most out of it. And if you just keep saying yes to like simple tasks or things that you already know how to do, or just things that may not lead to high impact, then you're not really taking care of your own growth and your career. So you really need to be mindful about saying no. Now, of course, you can't just say no to everything. There's like a time and a place when you really need to think about it, and also like where you are in your growth stage. But as you get more senior, you really need to think about the projects and the things that come to your plate and say no when it's appropriate. Lesson number 29 is that there's always more work to do. There's always more work to do. That's very urgent task. There's really no reason why you should be doing that at like 10 p.m. or whatever. There's always more work. So unless it's like actually a really like serious emergency, like a SEV, there's no need to do that extra task. Lesson number 30 is to touch grass. See how good I am. I haven't played in a while. No. Terrible. If you want to do this for the long haul, be an engineer, you need to get out and manage your burnout. Let's see if I can hit this. You know, I didn't really like golf that much until I actually tried it. There's nothing really like golf that gets your like headspace out of working. So when I get really busy, I like to go and just hit some balls or go play and just go play around. These feel great. I just got these new ones. That felt good. Tip number 31 is a little controversial, but I actually think it's okay to burn out a little when you're early in your career. I think when I was studying for my boot camp and also the interview preps, and like the first few years, I really went hard. And I think I learned so much during that time that I was able to accelerate my growth so much. So the thing is, it's totally worth having these moments of like strategic burnout if you're trying to achieve something great. And for me personally, getting into Fang, like that interview prep, I did it twice. It took me 2 years to get into Meta, and every single time that I was prepping, it was about a 2 month or so of prep. And it was like just grinding every day, at least 4 hours after work, just like a little bit before, a little bit after. It was just like so much of work. And I was definitely burnt out by the end of it. But the result was that I was able to get into Meta. I will and change my entire career trajectory and also like total comp trajectory. So it's just like totally worth it. Tip number 32 is that true growth only happens when you're really pushing yourself. When you're picking a project and you're looking at tickets and things like that, and you're always tend to pick those tickets that you know 100% that you can do, and you kind of avoid the ones that scare you, that chances are you're too comfortable and you're probably not growing. The thing is, true growth happens when you're pushed and when you're really challenged beyond your current understanding. Just like working out or learning some new skill, you really need to push that boundary, or you're gonna run the risk of stagnating and just like not really growing. This career moves so quickly, like the engineering path moves so quickly, that you really need to keep pushing yourself and growing. You're not gonna grow at the pace that you probably want. So keep pushing yourself. Lesson number 33 is to find a good mentor. If you don't have a mentor right now in your career, you should really think about it and look for one. Most people don't realize that just a simple nod in the right direction or course correction can have a dramatic effect in your career. Even if you're a senior engineer or pretty seasoned, there's always something new that you can learn. Whether it be in the domain of performance optimization or mobile or backend, whatever you're trying to learn, I always say that you should actively look for the people that can help you learn and grow. Especially if you're new in your career, a good mentor is going to be one of the biggest differentiators for your velocity. So look for a good mentor. Lesson number 34 is to teach and share your knowledge. I always say that you don't actually know whether or not you have mastery of a certain topic or subject until you try to teach it to someone else. You'll often find that you think you know something really well, but you'll try to teach it to someone and then you'll realize there are a ton of gaps in your knowledge. This happened to me a few times when I'm, doing one of my mentoring sessions. One of my mentees would ask me about a tool or some new technology or maybe like to how to handle a certain situation, and I may just not know or not really understand clearly. And to me, that's like a really great opportunity for me to like think about that and later dig in and learn and improve and fill in those gaps that I have. So in my opinion, one of the best ways you can grow as an engineer is actually to try and teach. So try to teach and see what you actually know. Lesson number 35 is to not be greedy with your knowledge or your scope. Earlier in my career, I used to be a little greedy when it came to the work. I wanted to be the one who's working on the most important things and wanted to be the one to be called on when important things came up. I try to kind of hoard information and not really be very generous with my time or my information. But over the years, I realized that sharing your knowledge and being very open and being very helpful is actually a much better way to grow as an engineer. And if you're ever worried that someone's going to steal your idea or your scope or whatever you're worried about for not sharing the knowledge that you have, you don't really need to worry too much. In reality, most people don't actually act upon like the knowledge that is shared. It's very rare that your ideas will get stolen all the time from you. If it does get stolen, then you know to be careful next time around that specific individual. But in general, my experience has been the more I give, the more I've received in return. So just be very generous with your knowledge in general. Lesson number 36 is to check your ego. You may think that you know everything and you're a rock star engineer, but the reality is there's always someone better and you probably don't know as much as you think you know. There's so many things that happen and change in the tech industry that it's just simply impossible for you to be on top of everything. So I remember I got really humble when I was actually trying to do my first round of interviews. I remember I was a senior engineer at Capital One. I had gotten promoted 3 times already in the short few years that I was working, and I thought I was hot stuff, right? I thought, of course, I could get into Meta and all these other different FAANG companies. I did some prep, some, interview courses and stuff like that. But I don't think the first time around I took it as seriously as I should have. Basically, I got rejected to every single FAANG interview, and I was really distraught. I thought I was an amazing engineer 3 years into my career, but turns out I just didn't really know that much about fundamentals of engineering. The next time around, I really just humbled myself and I took my studying very seriously. Long story short, I was able to land a few roles and I decided to join Meta. But yeah, so that story worked out pretty well, but even now as a staff engineer, I still think about like this ego, checking my ego at the door. And when I go into a new domain area or a new work stream, I always try to come in with like kind of an open mind and not just go in saying that I know everything. Because if you think you know everything, then you'll feel like you don't need to learn anything more. Keep your ego checked. Now, lesson number 37 is one of my favorite lessons, and it's to stop proposing ideas and just go and build it. Obviously, there's a little caveat here. You can't just be going around building everything that's not aligned, but the fundamental nature of this particular idea is that you don't want to wait for permission to try something new or to test an idea out. You really need to just find the right opportunity, time, and like the right partners and a way to convince others of your ideas. And you just really need to go and build it. The thing about proposing ideas and just talking about the ideas is that everyone in the room will always say, that's a great idea. That's amazing. We should iterate on this and think about this more. But the thing is, that really doesn't go anywhere. What usually ends up happening is that people will just talk about it and never actually do anything about it. But if you feel strongly about an idea, some new project or side project, and you think that it's gonna make a big impact in your company's bottom line, you should be the one to go out and execute and push the idea and test it yourself. Most people lack initiative, and if you're that one engineer that has a strong bias for action, you're going to be very successful. Don't propose it, just go and build it. Now, lesson number 38 is that you need to recognize that your job doesn't define you. One of the common things that happens when you work in Silicon Valley and you're in the tech industry, and especially at FAANG level companies, your identity kind of becomes your job. And to be honest, I am guilty of this still quite a bit. Even in my YouTube channels, I often just say that I'm a staff software engineer at Meta. And when I meet like people at church or like just other social events, we often go to the natural like conversation, small talk of what do you do for work? And I say I work at Meta, and it's a huge part of my identity, but I'm always trying to think about ways to escape this like identity as a whole. And I'm more than just this one job. And I guess like even doing YouTube and these things will help me with that like kind of journey of like discovering myself beyond my work. But I think it's really important for you to think about as you go on this journey of work, because a lot of things can happen at work that is outside of your control. And if your identity is so bound to this one job, those events that are outside of your control, if they're negative, can really hurt. Lesson number 39 is that you can lose your job at any time. One of the common things you'll hear is that like, oh, we're like a family, Reality is no matter how close you are with anyone at your work or how safe you feel at work, you can and will one day be fired. Who knows? Knock on wood, so far I haven't been fired, knock on wood. But at the same time, like I know that I'm just a cog in a big machine. Even if I'm like an amazing engineer and my org and my team really needs me, the thing is I can be replaced. Anyone can be replaced. Even CEOs can be replaced. So just remember that a job is just a job at the end of the day. Tip number 40 is that you should invest in yourself. At the end of the day, if you change jobs or you get fired or do anything, what you learn and what you invest in yourself is what you'll keep at the end of the day. Whether that be learning a new skill or mastering some new framework or even working out or making new relationships. Those are all investments to yourself. And I think it's one of the most important things to keep thinking about as you grow as an engineer, especially when you're like tackling new projects or thinking about what to work on next. You should take some time to do some self-reflection on how you want to grow and how you want to invest in yourself so that you can maximize on whatever you want, whether that's be work-life balance or your career, your total compensation. To me, this YouTube channel is in a way a form of investment. Not only does it help me present my ideas better, I find that writing and preparing these videos and filming, like I just learned so much about how to think clearly and tell compelling stories. And all of these kind of knowledge, like these things that doesn't seem to like naturally translate to work, all does. I definitely found myself to be able to present better. It just helps me all that much more. So the final lesson is to remember to invest in yourself. Everything that you do matters. So that's my 40 lessons of 10 years of software engineering. I know it was a little long, but I hope it was worth it at the end of the day. Let me know which lesson was your favorite one. But yeah, with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.